Good evening and welcome to the Get Football Mercato show. Here every weekday to bring you the latest transfer news from across France, Germany, and Italy. I'm your host, Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Alessandro Pugliese from Get Italian Football News, Axel Falk from Get German Football News, and I will also be filling in for this evening for Get French Football News. We'll start this evening with the news that sort of broke early this afternoon in Germany as Max Meyer looks to be closing in on a move finally, but not quite where we or even he may have expected Axel earlier this week. Where in the Premier League does it look like he's heading?
Crystal Palace, actually, which was probably not where either Meyer himself or his agent Whitman would have expected him to go, saying they call him a undoubtable world-class player who would definitely go to Russia with the national team. I wouldn't have expected this transfer to happen, this move to happen beforehand, but could be a very good transfer. I think it would be a fantastic deal for Crystal Palace because Max Meyer is a very competent player in midfield who can perform a very perfect juggling act if given space and time. But for Meyer, it seems quite strange to leave Schalke on those terms and to then go to Crystal Palace, a club that, I mean, if he is actually world class, I think he should be seen as a bit better than them. We all due respect to Crystal Palace, of course, but it's a very strange one. But it could turn out to be quite spectacular if things work out well.
It's an interesting one, isn't it, Axel? Because there's lots of facets to this move, really. Obviously, Crystal Palace probably wasn't his first destination when he was thinking about possibly even Barcelona at the very start of the summer when the rumours came out, at least with his agent was looking at that kind of club. But at the same time, a lot of things have been held up due to his wage demands, which might be something that the Eagles can appease and a platform for him that it may be in a year and a half might get him the big move that he is looking for.
Definitely, and as I said last Friday, I think the general interest has cooled down due to his wage demands and due to his actions against Schalke, because he's both Meyer himself and of course his agent Whitman have been quite vocal in their and against Schalke and have been kind of smearing their own name and Schalke's name, which has of course not been appreciated by anyone in the footballing world. So I think his name has been quite smeared in the footballing sphere of many nations, and so as you said, Barcelona might have been interested at the beginning of the summer, but now the whole saga might end with Crystal Palace, which is quite strange.
An odd end to what might be one of the more interesting transfer stories, and maybe a warning to others that maybe rate themselves a little bit too highly. But let's go on to some breaking news, really, that we have from Italy. It came in, Sandro, just before we started, so it's not even in our script. But Luka Modric is supposedly interesting into Milan. There's supposedly interest both from the Croatian and obviously the club. I don't think they would turn down a player like that. But at the same time, it looks like agents are looking to try and make this deal happen. Can it really happen?
So this is certainly a bit of a bombshell. While another Croatian has landed in Milan tonight in Sime Vrsaljko, Gianluca Di Marzio and the team at Sky Sport Italia are reporting that Inter dream of signing Real Madrid star Luka Modric. First contacts have been made with his agents. The Croatian apparently is open to potentially moving to Milan. The report also mentioned that he had discussed club play with his Croatian teammates at the World Cup in Brozovic, Perisic, and now the aforementioned Vrsaljko, who will be completing his move officially tomorrow. And also, interestingly, the report mentions that Inter believe they already have a deal in place for Arturo Vidal from Bayern Munich, who is at the moment the plan B. And for the moment, the Nerazzurri will try to make quite a big name signing in Modric. Otherwise, they will look to just close the deal for Vidal. So, I mean, this really continues Inter's fantastic work on the Mercato this summer. They've really improved their squad in basically every area of the pitch, and now it's up to Luciano Spalletti to put the product on the field.
Yeah, it's surprising, this transfer window for Italy, full stop. But you mentioned it there, Sandra, and I do want to delve a little bit deeper into summer, because they did some nice cut price deals last summer, but they've brought in Quadro Asamoah, a nice bit of experience, a Serie A winner, obviously, with Juventus. Visalcio is through the door now, obviously, with Atletico Madrid confirming the move as well. Nainggolan's already through the door. There's talks of Vidal, and we will mention him a little bit later, potentially coming in still. Adding Luka Modric to that kind of mixture, with Lautaro Martinez as well up front, with Mauro Icardi still staying. Are they, even though Juventus have brought in the superstar that is Cristiano Ronaldo, have they built a potential title contender in Inter?
I believe so. It'll certainly be tough. I mean, we've seen Juve's resilience and depth come through time and time again over the past 7 years. So it will certainly be tough, but especially if one of Modric or Vidal come, I think Inter fans should be dreaming of at least a serious Scudetto fight.
They have to be, don't they? I think pulling off a move like Modric might just be as good as if the one that the old lady obviously pulled off earlier this summer. On to things in France now, and there's been some interest in Rennes midfielder James Lea-Siliki from a number of clubs across Europe, including the main ones mentioned in the report, which are Everton and Borussia Dortmund. Obviously, Everton would have seen a nice closer look of him over the weekend, because they played a friendly in the Brittany side, and he did reasonably well. Scored a couple of goals. A really good midfielder, box-to-box kind of player, can sort of fill in any role that they need to across that midfield, can play a bit more defensively if they need to. Strong, a great drive on him, a little bit like it reminds me of a Yaya Toure sort of drive on him when he needs to, but it has had his moments as well with the clubs, little bits of falling outs, little bits of arrogance, maybe some people might mention it, but at the same time, the 22-year-old is a very good player, and there's a number of other clubs supposedly interested in. A club outside the Europe's top six have phoned Rennes as well to understand their position on the player, but Rennes are pretty unwilling to sell their man. They're trying to keep as many of these players that they can. Having already sold Yoris Nyenyon this summer, they want to try and keep in with Grenier coming in and others, looking like Rennes might be pushing for more consistent Europa League football. But he would be a good signing for Everton if they were to bring him in. They maybe need a little bit extra in that centre of the park, maybe a little bit more guile, a bit more exuberance, a bit more of a link between the back and the front of that team. And he's exactly the kind of man that may be able to do it on a regular basis. And I want to bring you in on this one, Axel, obviously, because he might also he's obviously also interesting Dortmund, and their deal for Axel Witsel seems to be slowing down somewhat, even though there is reportedly a release clause in his contract with the Chinese club. But midfield is somewhere that Dortmund is obviously still looking to strengthen. 22-year-old French player, played plenty of games in Liga, maybe another young star for them to bring in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't say that I've actually watched him that much, but I'd take your word for his quality. I mean, Borussia Dortmund are always interested in good and young midfielders, it seems, and I would say that, I mean, signing a 22-year-old should be probably a better deal than signing a 29-year-old Axel Witsel. But as I do not know too much about the player, I can only speak for Borussia Dortmund and what they might need, and that is, of course, a more resilient midfielder in Witzel's mold, so to speak, a more aggressive one. And if he does fit that profile, then it's, of course, would be a fantastic signing for Borussia Dortmund or another top six club in Germany, of course. But as I haven't watched him that much as you have, I'll let you be a judge on how well he would fit that profile.
I think he would be a nice fit into that team. I think Dortmund at the moment do have, they would play with someone like Hagawa or or Sahin, although obviously, like you mentioned previously, Axel, that they may be souring on him a little bit, at least the fan base is. So maybe someone that does have that box-to-box presence. They may be missed, really, since Ilkay Gundogan. I know Mahmoud Dahoud might be more of the kind of player that they're trying to mould into that sense. But I think he would be a good link. The only worry for me would be consistency. I think James Lea-Siliki has been in and out of the Rennes side last season a bit because of disciplinary things, but also because of a couple of inconsistent performances, but does have the ability to really command games. And I'm sure the Toffees certainly saw that firsthand at the weekend, which is why their name's in the hat as well. Let's have our roundups then, and we'll start in Germany with you again, Axel. And there's reports coming out left, right, and centre about Ademola Lookman, who is looking to try and get back to Leipzig, preferably on a permanent deal if possible. And reports tonight that they are in final negotiations regarding the transfer, and the local media saying that it's almost a done deal.
Yes, it seems to be. Leipzig is, of course, a club with bags of money. Naturally, it's one of the richest clubs in Germany, and one of the most ambitious ones as well. Lookman spent last year there and did extremely well. Last spring there and did extremely well in the games he played. He scored a few goals and really showed that he has the potential to become something special. And if given playing time, and I think he would be given that at Leipzig. So to sign him for I think 18 million is something that's been quoted would be a very good deal, I think, for Leipzig. Even though they of course have a few very capable wingers already, but for a club like Leipzig, having depth and having quality could never be a bad thing. And considering they do have the money, and they have one of the best coaches at the moment when it comes to refining talent. And next season, of course, they will have Julian Nagelsmann, who is perhaps the best coach in Germany at refining talent. I can't see this going badly.
And the thing that will interest at least English viewers on this move is that it'll be disappointing to see him leave Everton, at least anyway, and not see him on local shores at least. But at the same time, there might be a little bit of a worry there with Oliver Burke going to Leipzig a couple of years ago and really struggling to find game time. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of attacking players in that lineup. You think of Sabitzer, you think of Werner, you think of Poulsen, Jean-Kevin Augustin, Bruma. There's plenty of talent really on that side of things. Is he going to get the game time?
I think he would. He got quite a lot of game time when he was on loan. I think that should be kind of a sign of things to come for him. I think he wouldn't move there if he wasn't going to play. I do not think Leipzig would spend 18 million on him if they aren't aiming to play him and give him time to develop. And as I said, Ralf Rangnick is an extremely capable coach when it comes to refining talent, and he does that through give them playing time and give them space to develop as players and as human beings. So I think he will get playing time. Will probably have a quite hectic schedule next season and the season after that as well. It's a club on the up, and clubs on the up need depth and need quality, and they need quality in that depth. So I would definitely think Lookman will get the playing time he needs, and I just only say that it's up to him how well he adapts to the German game once more.
And it's a bit more of that English migration to German shores at the moment that we're seeing. And another player that is being linked with the German clubs who is English is Luke Shaw. There's a surprise report that supposedly Wolfsburg are a bit interested in him. It seems, although he's obviously not necessarily a regular starter at Manchester United, Axel, it seems maybe a little far-fetched that he would head to the club.
Yeah. Albeit it wouldn't surprise me a bit because Wolfsburg have done some horrible business in the last few years. But I don't know if it would be horrible business, but I wouldn't say it would be brilliant business. At least they have already signed a few wing backs in the last few years, and they have one of the more promising wing backs in Germany at the moment in Gianluca Itta, who's 19 years old this season and will hopefully get some playing time, I say. And of course, Wolfsburg as a club that isn't famed for developing talent. So that could be a true, that could hinder, of course, Gianluca Itta, and that could be good for Luke Shaw, but it doesn't even be far-fetched. I can't see I can't see many worlds or many dimensions where Wolfsburg sign Luke Shaw in his current state or in Wolfsburg current state.
And you mentioned it there, and we've talked about another left back that was linked with Wolfsburg last week. I spoke to Andrew about it in Jerome Roussillon. It seems a bit strange, though, at the same time that they have two left backs on. Well, Verhagen, who's a relatively experienced player and a young player that is very promising as well. Does it still seem strange that they are continuously linked with the left back, or is that because of the strength of Ricardo Rodriguez in previous years that they may be thinking they need to keep upgrading back to his level?
That's a very good point, actually. It could have something to do with Ricardo Rodriguez. Could be they might be accustomed to a certain quality on that left flank, but at the same time, I think Verhagen is an extremely experienced and a very, very competent defender. And I wouldn't have said last season that the left back position was Wolfsburg's biggest weakness was probably the centre backs or the defensive midfield rather. So it's a bit strange that they keep hunting wing backs, because I think they signed two last summer with William and Jan Verhaeg. Poor Frag. So it is very strange, actually. But I don't know. I mean, it might just be Wolfsburg's policy to sign lots of wing backs and hope they somehow, sometime perform as well as Rodriguez did.
And it's going to be interesting. It always seems like Wolfsburg, even though they did struggle last season, they always seem to try and tempt anyone and everyone that they can get through the doors, because they still have a bit of a pull. On to other news, and we briefly touched on it earlier, potentially, that Arturo Vidal is close to Inter. We also understand that he's looking now like potentially plan B, should Modric be one to come through the door. At the same time, that maybe leaves the Chilean in Bayern Munich as well a bit in limbo now. Axel, obviously they're looking to try and move him on now with new manager and new ideas going on, and him seeming not to fit the mold. But a loan deal with an option to buy, would that be the ideal scenario for Bayern Munich to let him go and move on from Vidal?
Probably not. I would actually say that Niko Kovac could use Arturo Vidal in his system, because Niko Kovac is reliant on very frantic and very frantic and very hectic midfielders. But I mean, loading him out seems quite strange, because I mean, he's 30 years old, I think. So why would he be loaned out and then return? Perhaps it's more about Inter, and that Inter doesn't want to spend that money on a 29-year-old right now. It could also be that he is Plan B, so they might actually sign him, even though they possibly and potentially sign Modric, which. So it could be both, but it wouldn't be the best for Bayern Munich. I don't think. It might be the best for Inter, and it might be quite good for Vidal. But for Bayern Munich, it seems quite odd to load him out in his current state. I would either use him or sell him on.
And it gets interesting as well from a Munich perspective, at least, Axel. That they're obviously looking like they want to get rid of Vidal. It looks like Thiago might still be someone that is interesting other teams, and they may be willing to let go. They obviously brought in Tolisso last season, but they still feel a little bit thin on the ground in midfield. Is that maybe a worry for them? Maybe not on a domestic front, at least anyway, but potentially, or at least in a European front, that they may be sort of a little bit weaker if they do let a couple of these players go, especially from a squad perspective.
It could be. Domestically, it could be a problem. They haven't had that much competition in the last few years, but with a new coach, Niko Kovac is unproven at this level. He performed extremely well with Eintracht Frankfurt, but he's unproven at this level, I would say. So it's very uncertain. Lots of uncertainty in Bavaria right now. So yeah, they do look a bit weak in that position, and in quite a few positions, I would even say. However, I'd also like to point out that Niko Kovac is actually a very good coach when it comes to making the best out of very, very, very little. He did it at Eintracht Frankfurt. Of course, he managed to win the DFB Pokal with a very well, a decent squad, but it wasn't good enough to win the cup. I mean, that was quite far-fetched to believe to begin with. So I wouldn't count him out from anything, because Niko Kovac has the abilities to perform very, very well with close to nothing, but they do look a bit weak in quite a few positions, and midfield is not an exception to that. And if they do let Vidal and Thiago go, I would probably consider. Well, I would probably assume that they would sign a new midfielder in the future.
It's going to be an interesting one. And getting an Italian perspective on that potential Vidal deal, Sandro, it does sound like it may be plan B now should Modric come through the door. But if he does go to Inter, does he add to that midfield with Nainggolan in there as well? And even if Modric doesn't turn up, he's an extra addition that can add some extra miles and some undoubted tenacity, at least, to that Inter midfield.
Oh, no doubt in my mind. Vidal on Inter would be something special, especially paired with Nainggolan under Spalletti. That would be a crunching midfield, no doubt. Would definitely love to see that happen.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to be a midfielder on the other side as well. I might wear 2 pairs of shin pads if I was playing against those two on a weekly basis. On to things in Serie A now, and we'll talk. Well, obviously, Versalco's deal has been completed, and we mentioned that earlier. So we'll go on to the news that we were going to start with, and that's reportedly AC Milan looking at Adrien Rabiot of Paris Saint-Germain, who has interested Barcelona this summer as well. What do you think for a potential move to him to AC? And I know they're obviously still financial restrictions, and it might be a little bit difficult to convince the Frenchman to leave Paris, but someone that could add some dynamism to their midfield?
Yeah, so at the moment, Mediaset have reported that Milan sporting director Leonardo has spoke to Rabiot's mother/agent. The Frenchman's contract does expire next summer. And I do think Rabiot would represent an upgrade in the midfield for Milan, a place where I think they could definitely use a signing to upgrade their squad. Obviously, there is always the question of FFP, especially under the new ownership, how that will all work out. For me, I still think a priority for Milan, even though they're about to pull off a very nice deal with the Bonucci-Caldara swap and probably getting Higuain, they still need to offload a couple of guys off the books. For Rabiot, obviously, this summer has shined a light on potential attitude problems. And I don't think Gattuso, if he is still there, would be having any of that in his squad. But, I mean, this represents definitely a possible upgrade for Milan's midfield.
I suppose the worry from our point of view, obviously a Paris Saint-Germain player who had seen plenty of Adrien Rabiot, who had an excellent season this season before last, but started well and tailed off last season. As best as a box-to-box player, I think, but he did play a bit more defensively last season due to injuries and bits like that, but did struggle at times, didn't have the greatest games in the big games. And his attitude has always been a little bit of a question mark, at least. It's not just from his statements where he's mentioning that when they lost to Real Madrid, it's not like they're playing Mets, which fair enough is true, but it is an outspoken comment to say the least. And his mother's involvement in his proceedings of the past, him hinting he wants to leave PSG before a couple of seasons ago, mentioning this summer that he's disgruntled, obviously, with the French news where he was on the supplementary squad and then ruled himself out of that because he didn't want to be on that list. He wanted to be in the main squad. A little bit selfish. Do those sort of attitude problems pose a little bit of a worry for you, Sandro, for Milan, even though he is such a talented player?
I think they do, to be honest. But again, because his contract does expire next year, we could see Milan get him on a pretty cheap deal, or maybe even try to lock him up for free next summer. But like I said, if Gattuso's still there, I don't know how much of any of that he would let slide in his locker room.
That's a good point about Gattuso, but I'm not sure he's met Rabiot's mother just yet, at least. Anyway, that might be a fierce fight to keep an eye on should it happen. On to some deals that have got, well, one that's gone through at least anyway, according to Juventus, and that's Favilli, who's head to Genoa. Obviously, he signed, Andrea Favilli joined Juventus earlier this summer from Ascoli, and then is now obviously heading to Genoa loan, believed to option to buy as well. What do you think to the move?
I think it represents a pretty good deal for both sides. So Gianluca Di Marzio is reporting that Andrea Favilli is set to join Genoa on a $5 million loan deal, plus the option to buy for an additional $7 million, in which case Juve would also retain a buyback option for the following 2 seasons. So we've seen Juve and many Italian teams use this formula before, sending out a player to a lower team in the standings to receive more playing time, and while keeping a buyback option in case they rise and fulfill their potential. So I was at Juve's game versus Bayern Munich in Philadelphia, and the first time I've really seen him play, he bagged a brace, and he definitely is a talented young striker who has a big body and big presence. So I think this is a good deal for all sides involved. For me, he's also a bit of a replacement for Pietro Pellegrini, Genoa star youngster who joined Monaco in January. So I'm expecting Favilli to get some decent playing time at Genoa.
And it'd be an interesting one as well, because they did have their moments last season where they were sort of struggling near the bottom of the table, and they also did really struggle for goals. Ended up only the third least amount of goals, joint with Benevento, obviously went down as bottom. But that's hopefully something he can address. Do you think he can be the man to lead Genoa's line next season and really propel them more from towards safety and not have the worries that they had at the end of last season?
I think so. I mean, he's definitely a guy, a profile that would play as a prima punta center striker. He's got a big build, and I think he could do the job. I mean, he's 21 now, so he should be coming into himself.
It'll be interesting to see how he rises, especially if he does do well in there. Genoa try and sign him permanently as well. We'll wait and see. On to the final bit of news in Italy, and it's newcomers, or returning newcomers, at least in Frosinone, signing a player and also having an interest in another who is interesting, another Italian club as well. And let's talk about the signing, at least the first, of Hal Fredson from Udinese for the newcomers. What can you tell us about the deal?
So Emil Halfredson has joined Frosinone from Udinese on a permanent deal for an undisclosed fee. But this is certainly a good, solid deal by the newly promoted club. Halfredson's played in Italy the last 6-7 years with Hellas Verona and Udinese. And he brings a depth of experience and has a very good left foot in the middle of the park. So I think this is a solid signing for Frosinone.
And they're also looking at strengthening up front as well with Lucas Perez potentially as a loan signing. There's also obviously interest from Lazio, who reportedly looking at him in English press, at least anyway, and Arsenal slapping about £7 million price tag on him, which doesn't sound the craziest amount, but it does sound a little bit crazy that he's interesting, a potential Champions League contender and also potential newcomers. What would you think if Frosinone could get someone like Perez through the door? Could he maybe fire them towards safety?
Yeah, I mean, this would probably be a pretty big coup for Frosinone. I know things haven't worked out at Arsenal for the Spanish forward, but he's certainly has a bit of talent. And I think he could potentially do well in Italy. I mean, being on a squad like Frosinone, it might be tough in terms of chances created and opportunities in front of goal. But he could represent someone who can carry the team above the safety line.
And it's going to be an interesting one should he join that. Be a really good signing for them. That's what you kind of need to do as a promoted side. On to things in France, and there's plenty of interesting deals up in the air and bits like that. And starting with Newcastle having interest in Lille star Thiago Meyer. Reportedly, the club have looked to try and get the player on loan with an option to buy. It's an interesting one, given that he was sort of star signing as you were for Leo last season, obviously having that big reputation from Brazil, the youngster. Everyone thought that he might be the sort of star in this sort of class of many youngsters that were going to be growing under Marcelo Bielsa. Obviously, it didn't quite work out that way. It ended up more of a disaster than anything, with Thiago Meyer ending up playing centre midfield, out on the wing, left back at times, and he was not a left back in any kind of description. He really struggled, in all honesty. He never quite adapted to French football. The physicality wasn't great for him. He didn't quite have the verve or the space or the pace really to live up to things, and that may be the worry that some Newcastle fans should have, because he didn't really hit the ground running now. Would he be someone that adds something to them? Because they obviously are looking for more cut price deals and more riskier moves. He may be someone that does still have the talent. He's still very young, still early, only just 20 years old. He's still got a lot of talent to go for him. But at the same time, the worrying signs are that spell at Lille might have not only a talent effect, but also psychological effect. There was the moment where obviously the fans came from the stands and some of the players. There was a lot of difficult moments that either are going to make or break a player, and if Newcastle do sign him, they may need to give him a bit of cuddling first to see he's okay. But he could be someone that does something special, or he could be someone that absolutely explodes. It completely depends on how he can be nurtured under Rafa Benitez, and maybe he might be the right manager, other than someone like El Loco, who may be a little bit more tough to get along with, at least. On to another player who is pretty tough for a lot of teams to get on with, and that's Hatem Ben Arfa. He's looking for a new club, having been released from Paris Saint-Germain this summer. Looking at a free move, several places had been offered to Rennes previously, and they'd offered his project to him, but the 31-year-old said no. It looks now like Bordeaux in recent hours have made a fresh approach for the free agent, according to Foot Mercato. It's unclear whether Le Girondins' approach so far will interest the mercurial forward, you might say, but he is looking for a project that excites him. Obviously had that spell at Nice where he really regrew his career and maybe took the riskiest step, and we did say at the time of heading to Paris to try and prove himself at the highest level again. Didn't really get the game time he wanted, and his attitude sort of reared its ugly head a little bit again. But he looks like he wants to stay in France. He looks like he wants to try and find that interesting move. Whether someone like a Monaco or a Lyon or a Marseille would take a risk is highly unlikely, really. So someone like Bordeaux, with potential new owners, with an interesting squad of a couple of good young players. I'm thinking Pugliese, I'm thinking Varda in midfield as well. Got some, obviously allowed Malcolm to grow as well. So he could be someone to really be a linchpin in that side and do similar to what he did in Nice and sort of improve that squad a little bit, add a little bit of flair, add a little bit of creativity. He is still that kind of player, even though he's essentially had a year off, making Instagram videos and insulting people on the internet while not playing for Paris Saint-Germain. But we'll wait and see if he does make that move, because it would be nice to see him playing his football again, because he can be such a real dream to watch. But at the same time, he must be an absolute nightmare to deal with on a weekly basis. On to some interesting news that will interest at least Liverpool fans, and that's Nabil Fekir. Still in the headlines for them, but at the same time, it looks like he's closer to signing a new deal with Lyon instead of making the move to the Premier League in the end. That's according to France Football. He's a great player, but it just feels like that Liverpool saga has ended up with him wanting to stay in France for the time being, at least. The worries about his knees, with obviously the injuries he's had over the last couple of years, especially that big one that he had a couple of years ago that saw him miss most of the season, has really maybe put teams off. I remember obviously Liverpool having cold feet previously on someone like Loic Remy for similar kinds of faults in their medicals and wanting to lower the price, and that's not going to fly for Jean-Michel Aulas, who is a feisty customer and as feisty as they come. And really, if they're going to come back in, Liverpool, they would not just have to offer the money that they mentioned earlier. They may even have to add a bit of a sweetener to try and make a deal happen. Whether they can do that now, whether they would just simply allow Fekir to sit on it and allow a contract extension to happen, which would be nice. It will give Fekir the payday that he's likely looking for to sort of appease himself, having got so close to Liverpool just before the end of a couple of months ago, at least. But it would be great to see him stay in France, see if he can improve on that, especially the first half of last season where he was sensational. If he can return to those levels, it will be pretty great to see. And just very quickly on some deals in France, and briefly, Sunderland defender Lamine Kone is undergoing a medical with Strasbourg tomorrow ahead of a loan deal. The former Lorient man looking to return to French shores. Will be interesting to see how he does. And also from our report yesterday of Cone looking at Matt Miyazaga, I've seen no and now in the race for that, and it looks like the American is leaning towards a move to Le Canaries. It looks like that club interests him a little bit more, a bit bigger profile, a bit bigger stadium, looking towards more Europe than staying up. It might be a slightly better move for the American than heading to Com. That's all that we have time for this evening. My thanks to Alessandro, Axel, and all of you at home for your company this evening. Please do join us again tomorrow for more from the crazy world of the transfer window. Good night.